We went straight down into the basement and began a frantic search for the belongings of the deceased victims using the flashlights we had left down there before. I was in the main room with the furnace, sorting through stacks of junk. There were definitely items from victims everywhere, things that went unnoticed by us before, like graffiti cans someone must have brought to tag the old buildings, women's bags, wallets, etc. The amount of those types of items down there made my stomach queasy, but I kept searching, the silence cut down by the sounds of things rustling around. Grace, I heard Vanessa whisper out my name from the adjacent room. I hurried through the doorless entryway that led to that area of the basement and shined my flashlight on Vanessa, who was leaning on the wall with her ear against it. "Come listen," she whispered, and gestured for me to come near. I drew closer and pressed my ear over the wall, frowning. I didn't hear anything but our quiet, rhythmic breathing, so I gave her a confused look. I heard sounds in the wall. Vanessa looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. We both were thinking the same thing, thinking about how 3 of the 4 children's bodies were found within the wall. "Probably rats," I stupidly said. She gave me a look. "Have you seen one living thing since we've been in this mess?" I didn't say anything. Vanessa looked over at a tall wardrobe standing in the corner, mahogany and draped with cobwebs. She walked over to it and looked inside it. There were dusty coats inside, and she pushed them to one end, jumping as she was startled by her own reflection in a mirror that took up the whole back panel of the wardrobe's interior. "Weird," I noted, shining my flashlight at it. A sound made us turn our heads behind us. An object we disturbed during our search settling in place, maybe something dropping or shifting naturally. But when I looked back at the mirror, I saw a glimpse of the upper half of Peter's face peering over my right shoulder, only his eye sockets and brown bangs visible. I screamed and jumped back. "What?" Vanessa asked, shining the flashlight around to see nothing at all. "Hee," I stuttered, my hand on my chest as I looked behind me and backed into the wardrobe. It slightly shook, and the mirror inside jostled out of position, a corner dropping and revealing a black crack. "Wait a second." Vanessa removed the mirror to find a dark hole leading into the wall. My mouth fell open. I grabbed Vanessa's arm as she lifted her leg to go inside. "What are you doing?" "What if it's in the walls?" she whispered, shrugging me off and climbing inside. "Are you coming or what?" I cursed under my breath and followed her, bending low and slipping through the hole to the narrow, crumbly space between drywall. I didn't think the basement could get creepier, but somehow it did. I felt claustrophobic there, and I wanted out immediately, but I knew we needed to leave no stone unturned, so I pressed on, following behind Vanessa. We reached a dead end soon, where the back of the staircase was presumably, and our flashlight beam reflected off something shiny under some light rubble. "Look!" Vanessa fell to her knees and pulled bits of wall and wooden beams off of a dark gray backpack. The silver zipper had caught the light. Immediately she zipped it open and triumphantly pulled out a sachet like the one I'd found earlier. The air was permeated with the smell of decay as soon as she revealed it, but we were too excited to care. "Why am I the designated eye holder?" I gripped as she gave it to me. "Come on, let's look for that purse before those things get tired of chasing Yazzie." Vanessa nudged me, and I led us back the way we came. "Where's the hole?" I asked as I looked at the part of the wall where I was sure we had entered. The tunnel stretched on farther than we remembered, and we could hear the sounds of light footsteps as someone we couldn't see ran just up ahead. Despite this, we pressed on, hoping it was the ghost of Peter returning for his eyes. We walked and walked and walked. "Oh God," Vanessa whispered as we realized we were stuck in an infinite loop behind the wall. "This can't be happening," I whimpered. "This can't be happening," I whimpered. It seemed like a lifetime later when my flashlight beam landed on a figure crouched with his back to us. The red shirt and black hair pointed to it being Peter, and he wept softly into his hands. "Peter," the first said softly as Vanessa clutched onto me for dear life. "We have something that belongs to you. Let us go peacefully, and you can have them." I felt a soft breath on the back of my neck and spun around, my heart jumping out of my chest. Vanessa screamed. Peter was now behind us with a grin that was impossibly wide. I looked down at his open hand, where the sachet, which I did not remember handing him, was now sitting. With that, he was silently pulled by an unseen force back into the darkness, the holes in his face looking at us the entire time. "Thank God," I cried, looking behind me to see that the hole leading out of that dreadful space had appeared again. We hurriedly climbed through the wardrobe, and back into the basement. Grace Sack's voice tickled my ear. The stagnant basement air was filled with the shrill sounds of Vanessa and I's terror as we burst into a run, not even bothering to look behind us. We beelined for the stairs, Vanessa running faster than me. I was scared that she'd leave me behind like I had left Zach behind. I tried to run faster as she reached the first step before I did, my shoes stomping the floor so hard it shook. Then suddenly I was under the floor, my body racked with pain and the sound of wood splintering and giving way, covering up Vanessa's screams. I looked up through the hole and saw Zach crouching over me, his pale hand reaching for my face. I thrashed wildly like a caged bird and kicked him away, scrambling deeper into the hole. It was then that I realized it was a crawl space, and there was a small hatch just beyond where one of the kids' bodies was found. I hurtled through it, crawling through the claustrophobic little tunnel caked with dust and webs. It smelled like rot down there, but I hardly noticed as I tried to listen to see if I could hear Zach giving chase. I didn't hear anything, but I looked behind me anyway. I couldn't hear anything because somehow the little blonde ghost was silently scuttling after me in the crawl space instead of Zach. Her mouth hung open, a black void like her eyes. Her dirty, cracked, and bloody fingernails scraped the floor as she went. Her movements looked unnatural, like she was in sped-up footage, and my heart lurched in my ribcage. I crawled faster, hyperventilating and feeling my mind cloud with overwhelming fear. Up ahead, I spotted a dead end, but just in front of it was a hole. I allowed myself to drop through, and I felt the crisp grass and something else cushion my fall. I rolled over on my back and looked to my side to see a faded, old pink clutch purse with a zipper and a bit of what looked like old blood smeared on it. I grabbed it and zipped it open as a stark white arm followed by a curtain of blonde hair slipped through the blow. A revolting stench unleashed into my nose as I pulled out another sachet and threw it at the wraith clawing her way towards me. Sarah, on all fours, stopped, stared at it, then snatched the sachet and crawled backwards lightning fast until she disappeared into nothingness. The tension in my body diminished as I was relieved of her presence. As I crawled from under the house, I wondered briefly about the crawl space, which very clearly seemed like a discreet escape route for a man who knew he was doing something terribly illegal, a way he could leave without being caught if the authorities came to his door. But if he had gone through such lengths, why did he end up killing himself and revealing his crimes? This didn't occupy my thoughts for too long as I looked out at the empty street and wondered where Vanessa was. Did she escape Zach? If so, where did she go? As if on cue, a distant scream echoed into the night, and my head snapped towards the tree-line behind the house on the left, which we had never explored. Realizing this was Vanessa's voice, I darted towards where I heard it, hoping beyond all hope that I could make it in time. I was not going to let her die like I had done to Zach. I weaved around the trees, my lungs on fire and my legs growing tired. "Vanessa," I called. "Where are you?" I spotted platinum blonde hair in the distance and sped up, approaching Vanessa, who was standing still and staring upward. I crashed into her, hugging her in relief that she seemed fine. I found Sarah's eyes and gave them to her. I told her breathlessly, "We just have one last pair left." I pulled back and looked at her shocked face. Finally, I followed her gaze and looked up, pointing my flashlight skyward. The eyeless corpse of what I recognized to be Lisa Waller dangled by a noose from a tree branch, cutting through the silence with the steady creaking of the rope. She was a white woman with brown hair, a tank top, shorts, and sneakers who seemed to be in her mid-20s to early 30s. I looked around, sweat falling into my eyes as I took in the sight of dozens of corpses hanging from the trees, all eyeless and all with nooses around their necks. Not only that, but there was a graveyard of cars just sitting there in the spacious gaps between the trees. I don't understand, I stuttered, recognizing the corpse of Rachel, who had killed Lisa in wraith form on video, hanging not too far away. "It's like how the eye ripper died," Vanessa whispered, facing me with eyes glossy with tears. "That's why we didn't see Bryce's corpse or Zach's. They end up hanging the bodies to mimic his death." But why, I blinked, at a loss. Vanessa shrugged, cluelessly. I decided to tell her about the crawl space. The purse was under the house. When I fell through the floor, I went through the crawl space, and there was a hole leading under there. I don't know why that sicko put it down there, but honestly, I'm more confused about why he went through the trouble of making an escape plan if he was just going to end up killing himself anyway. Maybe Vanessa considered. Maybe the killer didn't hang himself after all. Maybe he was their first victim. The curse could have started when they haunted him and pulled his eyes out, then hung his body. I mean, even the cops thought it was far-fetched for a man to hang himself after gouging his own eyes out, but they said there was no sign of foul play. So does that mean his ghost is around here somewhere? The thought was chilling to me. "I don't know," Vanessa looked at me, the same apprehension on her face. "Hey, that video we watched earlier," Lisa said. "William's parents were part of the occult, and that's why she thinks he's responsible. Witches or something, I guess. When he killed William last, the curse started. We don't even know how to find his eyes." I felt hopeless all of a sudden. He didn't go missing with something like the others did. "Wait a minute," Vanessa looked thoughtful. "That woman said that he had actually escaped from the basement at one point, but the killer chased him down and got him. I wonder if it was these woods, and that's why they put the bodies up here." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Look, what are you getting at?" I think William's eyes are out here," Vanessa replied. "I just have this feeling." "Are you serious?" "That'll take forever." I wiped the grime and dust off my glasses. "Do you have somewhere to be?" I huffed at her sarcastic response. The two of us started to meander, unable to look away from the hanging corpses as we did. I thought I heard a whisper, but when I looked around, I saw nothing. I worried we weren't alone out here. I unclipped my walkie and decided to see if John or Yasmine would answer hello. "Are you guys alive?" There was nothing but static. Vanessa filmed the hanging bodies, and I thought that was distasteful but remained silent. I heard a twig snap and looked over my shoulder, seeing an arm retract behind a tree. Before I could voice my concerns, Vanessa screamed up ahead. The body of John was hanging, eyes missing, and dark skin a ghoulish gray from lack of blood flow. I remember it just like it was yesterday, the feeling of great loss hitting me like a punch to the gut. Aside from Yasmine, he was the nicest to me out of everyone, and every time I try to recall one of his charming smiles or the way he would laugh at his own jokes, the visage of his dead face is smeared all over those memories. I kneeled next to Vanessa, who was sobbing in a heap on the ground, and wordlessly pulled her to her feet so we could run from the entity watching us. She didn't even question it as I dragged her along. She just clutched me and wept. Suddenly, both our walkies crackled to life, scaring the crap out of us both. But the fear was replaced with relief as Yasmine's voice came through. "Are you all alive still?" "I'm back, but I can't find anyone." "Yas, we're in the woods," I frantically all but yelled into the walkie-talkie as Vanessa went over to retch and dry heave next to a tree. "There's bodies hanging everywhere. They're the people who were killed in this place." "What the fuck?" And "Oh God, John is up there." Too, my voice shook as I broke the bad news. "He's dead. They got him." Yasmine cursed up a storm over the walkie, covering her grief with anger. And I interrupted her, knowing we had little time to spare. "We only have one last kid left. Vanessa thinks his eyes are out here, but you need to come help us look. We're in the woods behind that house you were looking at earlier." It was maybe 10 minutes before she found us, during which Vanessa and I had hid in a large tree hollow as we heard footsteps, crushing sticks and leaves all around us. Someone, something was following us and being eerily stealthy about it. And it could have been more than one. We were shivering within the hole in the rotting bark when we heard her call out, and we crawled out to meet her. "Why were you hiding?" Yasmine looked pale and exhausted as she regarded us. I had no doubt we looked similar. "There's things all around here. They've been following us," Vanessa whispered, putting a finger to her lips. "They haven't tried attacking yet, which is somehow creepier than if they did," I added as I glanced around us in paranoia. "But let's not wait until they do. Let's find this kid's eyes so we can leave this horrible fucking place behind." "What's that?" Yasmine pointed to the tree hollow where we had hid. The opening began at the ground, looking almost like a semicircle door to some elfin house. She pointed at something we didn't notice in our panic to find a hiding place from our pursuers, something that was sticking out of the ground a bit. It was white and thin. I bent down and inspected it, realizing it was a shoelace. I tugged it, and a moss-covered shoe broke loose from a pile of fallen leaves, acorn shells, twigs, and dirt. Vanessa gasped from behind me. "It's Williams. His body was recovered from the basement, missing his shoe." "You told me he didn't go missing with anything," I frowned. "No, Grace, he didn't go missing without a shoe," she corrected me irritably. "He was found dead without it." The pieces of the puzzle connected in my head. That woman on the video said he escaped the basement, ran into the woods, but ultimately got found and caught by the killer. I looked in the shoe to be sure the sachet wasn't inside, and to my great disappointment, it wasn't. "Yeah," Vanessa nodded. "It's a part of the story that's sort of hard to find, but I remember listening to a podcast, and they said he actually admitted that in his letter. The note he left behind was really long and full of weird, perverted stuff. Not all of it was released. He hid in here," I revealed, gesturing to the tree hollow after dropping the shoe, "and he was caught. And in the struggle, his shoe fell off." Vanessa started filming again, pointing the camera at the tree. "This is almost out of battery, but I need to get this shot." "Hey, what's that?" Yasmine and I followed her gaze. She had the camera pointing upwards. I shut my eyes, not seeing anything. "Ha! Look at that branch, under the one with the old bird's nest," Vanessa instructed, pointing with her free hand. Finally, my eyes landed on it, a sachet tied by the little rope, holding it close to a twig sticking out of the branch. "It's his eyes," I cried. "He put them in the tree." The depravity of the eye ripper astounded me. The tree reminded him of where he had found the little boy. The chase must have been a rush for him, aside from the fear of being caught. I imagined the sick pleasure he could have felt once he caught and killed him, using the tree as his own twisted memorial, where he would place part of the boy's remains to remind him of his gruesome crime. "Hold this." Vanessa shoved the camcorder in my hands and immediately got to work scaling the oak like an overgrown monkey. Yasmine and I watched her, antsy. "Ha ha ha." A little snicker caught our attention, and we looked behind us. I immediately recognized Rachel's eyeless face, cracked by a wicked red painted smile that slashed across her cheeks like a scar as she peeked around a tree. "Vanessa, hurry," I screamed. She looked down at the apparition slowly advancing on us and scrambled towards the hanging sachet. I grabbed Yasmine's arm and pulled her back, but stopped in my tracks when I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I turned, and there was an unfamiliar man, the spirit of another eyeless victim. Then came another, emerging from the trees, and another, a young teenage boy, and another, a woman in a police uniform. They wore different expressions, some of their expressions vacant, some smiling dementedly, some frozen in a silent scream, some twisted into a picture of perpetual misery with bloody tears and an upside-down smile that lengthened their jaw more than humanly possible. "Go back to the house and lock the door," Vanessa yelled, her fingers outstretched towards the sachet as she straddled a branch. "I'll meet you there." The palm of Yasmine and I's hands seemed glued together with sweat as we ran in between the eyeless wraiths, back towards where we could see that street in the distance. They extended their arms towards us, fingers grasping for our eyes. An unsettling chorus of pained moans, deranged laughter, unintelligible whispers, and furious yelling erupted all around us from the entities as we narrowly escaped with our lives. The next account of this experience will be the last one, and unfortunately, it'll get worse before it gets better. Anywhere but here, I blurted out before turning and dashing out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and through the front door. I could hear the others following me. I had no plan. But as soon as I saw the neighboring vacant house to the right, I beelined straight for it. Thank God it was unlocked too, and also deserted while being fully furnished, like the tenants had left in a hurry, and the layout of the floor plan was identical. We threw ourselves through the front door and fled into the living room. John immediately rushed to lock everything up and cover the windows with curtains. Yasmine curled up in a corner behind an armchair recliner, rocking back and forth, her face soaked with tears. Bryce looked about ready to cry himself, but he somehow held himself back as he furiously paced the floor and muttered to himself. Vanessa sat herself down on the sofa, camera still held in her hand, as if it were glued to it, and pathetically filmed us as she shook like a leaf. "What the fuck was that?" I murmured as I slowly slid my back down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. I had managed to grab my flashlight on the way out the basement, and it seemed John and I were the only ones that remembered T.O. to spirit, Vanessa replied, her voice completely hollow. "We should have never come. I'm going to make sure nothing's in here." John left the living room and grabbed an old, dusty walking cane that was leaning against the wall as a weapon. "You can't hurt a spirit that way," Vanessa called after him. He ignored her. She got up and traipsed over to Yasmine, crouching and putting the camera in her face. "So Yazzie, confession cam time. What do you have to say to yourself now that you know you're going to be the reason for our deaths?" Yasmine said nothing, staring into space and swaying back and forth. "Come on," Bryce weakly protested. "Hey," I snapped. "Leave her alone." "Lay, you wanted to come just as much as she did, in fact. You were the first person to agree to go. Don't even get me started on you." Vanessa spun around and shoved the camera in my face next. "I know you pushed Zach, you two were behind everyone, but I know he didn't just accidentally fall down the stairs. You should fess up to your sins before you die." I felt sick to my stomach. How did she know if she was ahead of us? Did she look back at the wrong moment? "Listen, he was shoving me too," I argued, afraid that I was going to be ostracized for this fatal mistake. Vanessa threw her head back and laughed. "Oh my God, dude, I was just shitting you. I didn't know you actually did it. Wow, you're like a murderer." "Shut up," I pushed her, and she fell back on her ass. But she simply stared up at me through the camera lens with a taunting smile. "Guys, this is really not the time for a catfight." Bryce stepped between us, giving me a warning glare. Suddenly, we were startled by a pounding on the door. We all leapt to our feet, our caveman instincts ready to take over at the sign of danger again. But a familiar voice bled through the door. "Hey, let me in," Zach pleaded, banging the door some more. "Hurry up, before they notice." I ran to unlock the front door and threw it open to the sight of Zach, sweaty and breathing hard, his glasses missing. He rushed past me and I quickly closed and locked the door, but not before catching a glimpse of the outside. Thankfully, the street was void of life, as I had half expected to see either of the creepy ghost children again. Zach stood in the center of the room, bent over with his hands on his knees and panting heavily. John had just come from upstairs. He seemed shocked, like the rest of us. "You're alive." "Barely," Zach said. "You were screaming so much," Yasmine said. "We thought for sure that thing back there had gotten you." Bryce nodded. We all looked at Zach as if we were beholding a miracle. "It chased me, but I got away." Zach walked to the corner and turned his head towards the ceiling. "Thank Christ, I got away. That was the most terrifying moment of my entire life. We need to figure out where to go from here," I said, pushing my glasses up my nose. "Well, apologizing clearly didn't fucking work," Yasmine grumbled. "Let's think about what we know about them," I mused. "They were brutally murdered by a psycho, and they want their eyes back." "Oh, yes. Let's magically conjure up a set of working eyes for each of them," Vanessa retorted. "You know, another crazy thing about this case is that their eyes were never found." Yasmine spoke slowly. "Some people say that maybe he ate them or just disposed of them, but no one knows. Not even his own eyes were found. Yeah, Because more creepy stories is exactly what we need right now, Bryce quipped. What if Yasmine seemed to brainstorm, slowly pacing the room. What if the eyes are still here? Who John squinted at her. Sometimes ghosts haunt people to get them to find their remains, Yasmine explained. If their eyes were in that house all along, but the police never found them. I mean, he hid their bodies in the walls. He could have hid their eyes too. We all stared at her. I shook my head. Yasmine, that's an insane theory. They said they're looking for their eyes, Yasmine replied indignantly. That doesn't mean they're still around. And if they are, they're probably rotted into dust by now, Bryce scoffed. I think it's worth a shot, John said. He noticed the look we gave him. Listen, I don't know about you guys, but I don't enjoy being trapped with a bunch of little demons, so I'm willing to try just about everything to get out of here, even if it means looking for rotted, dusty old eyes. Or we could sacrifice someone. We all stared at Zach. Up until then, he has been standing awkwardly against the corner of the wall, listening to us since he last spoke. He stared back stoically, and I realized he was dead serious. Come again, Vanessa raised an eyebrow. They want our eyes. So we should pick someone to sacrifice and give them that person's eyes, Zach said as he stepped forward slowly. Then they'll be satisfied and leave us alone. I think that person should be Yasmine. Since she led you all here. He's definitely going nuts. Bryce cautiously kept an eye on Zach, protectively putting an arm over Vanessa and making her back away from him. Meanwhile, Yasmine confronted the skinny boy. Oh yeah, you think that's funny? Yasmine pushed him back against the wall. Who do you think you are? You're only hanging with us anyway because John felt awful for you. Get back in your place before I put you there, asshole. You have lovely eyes. Zach seemed unfazed and stared unblinkingly at Yasmine. In fact, I didn't remember seeing him blink much at all. Was he really losing his sanity? Babe, do you hear this jerk? Yasmine looked to Bryce for help and frowned, seeing that he was just letting Vanessa cower behind him without making a move to stand up for her. The hell? Are you just going to let him talk to me like that? Listen, I don't think you guys should start a fight, Bryce meekly said. Zach, what's gotten into you? John asked earnestly, appearing genuinely concerned. Now's not the time for your weird sense of humor, man. Suddenly, there was a rustling of a bush coming from outside, where dead shrubbery lined the exterior walls. I held a finger to my lips to signal them all to be quiet, creeping over to the window. I discreetly peeked through the smallest crack in the curtains and saw a little girl, this time blonde with a blood-stained pink shirt and white shorts, crouching in the bushes with her face in her hands as if she were crying. But no sound came out. She was eerily still, with flesh as white as snow. I slowly backed away and gestured for everyone to go upstairs. They followed me up, and I closed us inside a bedroom and drew the curtains over the single window in there. The room was furnished with a big bed, a vanity dresser, and a nightstand with a closet door in the corner. The decoration made it clear that everything was from a different era. We're just more isolated in here, Vanessa complained. I feel better closed up in here than down there, I replied, glancing quickly at my exhausted face in the vanity mirror. What was it? Yasmine inquired nervously. The Jenkins girl again. No, it was a different little girl. I swallowed a lump in my throat. She was blonde and had on a pink shirt and shorts. She was just sitting there, curled up with her face in her hands like she was either crying or playing hide and seek. I could see everyone's faces fall in fear. Except for Zach's. He seemed absolutely emotionless all of a sudden, but he had been the most dramatic out of all of us so far. So maybe he had tired himself out. That sounds like Sarah, Vanessa whispered, turning the camera to me. That was the outfit she went missing in. Leave it to a die-hard true crime fan like Vanessa to remember even the smallest details about a homicide case she was obsessed with. Soullessness hurts, Zach quietly spoke, his voice void of emotion or any inflection. We all turned to him, and there was a beat of silence. He was facing towards the wall, away from us, just blankly staring at the flowery wallpaper that was peeling and faded with age. I frowned and stepped back. Something about him didn't feel right. His presence felt off compared to before. He didn't feel like the same person anymore. What's his deal? Bryce asked John, gesturing to him. He's just traumatized, John defended as he walked towards him. You all right, Zach? I know what happened in the basement. Was he grabbed Zach's arm and suddenly let go with a jolt of surprise going through his body, as if he had touched a hot stovetop. What? Vanessa asked. He's ice cold, man. John shook his head, bewildered as he glanced at his own fingertips, like he's been in a freezer. I think you should lie down. Zach let John ease him onto the queen-size canopy bed like those princess beds with the curtains I dreamed of having when I was 10. Zach lay down on his back with his blank gaze fixed upward, not saying a word more, and not making eye contact with any of us. Look, I think we need to go through with my plan, Yasmine said, drawing all our attention back to her. Zach's clearly in shock. We have to get him out of here. For once. I agree, Vanessa sighed. We have to do something. This is crazy. Bryce shook his head. I'm not going back to that house. Then stay, John replied harshly. Look after Zach. Does everyone still have their walkies? I patted the walkie while it was still attached to my belt loop, hovering over my jeans. Yasmine nodded after checking to see that her walkie-talkie was still clipped to the breast pocket of her pink sweat jacket. Bryce took his walkie out of his jeans pocket, and Vanessa took hers out of the pouch of Bryce's hoodie, which she was still wearing. John had it in his belt loop, too. Great, since phones don't work, maybe we can communicate that way. John lifted the walkie-talkie to his mouth. Testing, Shay. As his voice filtered through our walkies, I shushed him. So are we doing this or what? Let's go around back so that thing doesn't see us, Yasmine suggested. We all agreed, and she turned to Bryce and hugged him tightly, hoping it would be the last embrace they ever had. He awkwardly patted her back. She went to give him a kiss, but he turned his face away. What's wrong? Look around us, everything is wrong. Bryce didn't look at her. Whatever. Yasmine stormed towards the door, trying to hide the hurt of rejection on her face. Look after Zach and tell us if you need help. John, Grace, Vanessa, come on. We didn't know how much worse things would get from that point on.